All right, so in the last video, we talked about some of the latest updates that have been made to Flowise version 2, and one of the biggest updates are sequential agents. Now, sequential agents are basically a way for you to build really complex and sophisticated chat flows that use a variety of agents working together to basically help you switch between various tasks and call tools intelligently, all from a conversational point of view. And so you can imagine all of the things that you can build with this, especially when you have workflows that are very, very complicated, or you want to essentially have multiple agents working together with each other. And so I highly recommend actually checking out the documentation on the Flowise website. There's a great article by Toi 500. It's a really good article, and if you want to learn more about sequential agents and all of the nodes and how it works, this is a great way to get started. And so what we're going to do is let's first go back and take a look at all of the nodes that make up sequential agents, because this is essentially what you're going to be working with when you create your chat flows. And again, we don't have the time to actually get into what every single node does, but we're just going to cover just a really brief and basic overview, okay? And then we're going to get into the demo, and you'll be able to see how it works and how the agents work together. So these are your building blocks for using your sequential agents and using your nodes. And so first we have the start node that basically starts the entire chat flow. And so the chat flow is basically going to connect different agents together and working with various conditional based statements and various variables to perform tasks. So essentially you're going to connect a series of agents together with specific instructions, and then they're going to work together to give you exactly what you want. All right, so we have the start node, we have the end node, right? We have the state node, and what this does is it basically sets your variables. It sets your variables, and it also allows you to update your variables. And you can do this throughout the entire chat flow, all right? So that's very, very important. Your tool node allows you to call various tools, whereas your condition node basically evaluates a variable and then chooses a specific route or a specific place to go, right? So for example, if you were trying to choose a menu system, so let's say you were ordering something and you were ordering categories. So if you had office equipment, right? And so let's say you had stationery versus furniture, right, for your office supply store. If the person chose stationery, it would take them to the products page for stationery. And if they chose the furniture, it would take them to the product page for furniture, for example. Right? So you have your agents, and then you have your LLM nodes, and those are very, very similar. They have a few differences in their features and some of the things that they can do. Most importantly, LLMs can output JSON very effectively, which makes them really, really useful. But they both work together to do various tasks. The next thing you have is your loop, and your loop basically allows you to go to different points in your chat flow, especially when it comes to working between different agents. So that can be very, very helpful. You have your agent memory, and this basically just stores all of the conversations and the entire state of your chat flows. And then you have your conditional agent, which is a lot like the condition node, only it actually has an LLM attached. So it can actually evaluate virtually anything that you need to make a decision and route you to the next part in your workflow. All right. So this is essentially all of the nodes that you'll need or that you'll use when building your chat flows. Now, again, you need to get to know what each node does and really get to know it very well to be able to create effective chat flows. But what we're going to do is we're going to show you an example of a ticketing system that we built. And what we did was we actually used one of the examples from the documentation to actually build this, okay? And so this is a flight ticketing system where you can actually book flights using a sequence of agents and a sequence of chat flows, all right? And so this looks very straightforward and very simple, but in reality, it took me a little while to put this together because working with sequential agents is very different from, working with, like, say, just a straight program where it goes from, one step to the next, okay? But this is the basic layout and the basic design that we're going to be building, all right? And so we're going to have the start, which is essentially the start node. That's going to go to a welcome agent. where it basically greets the user and asks them if there's anything they need to do. And then whatever the user requests, that is going to go to a conditional routing agent. And that routing agent is going to decide which is the best place to go, whether to send the user to support, whether to actually send the user to flight search agent so they can actually look up flight information, or to actually send the user to a booking agent so that they can actually purchase their own tickets. All right, so this is the way it looks on paper. And so for the API, for this particular demo, we're actually looking up real-time flights. And for this, we're using SERP API. And this is actually available within Flowise. And specifically, we're using the Google Flights API. So we can actually look up real flights and get back that information. All right. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the actual chat flow. And as you can see, we start with the start node, and we've connected it to memory. And whenever you have your start node, you actually want to set up a default chat model. And this is going to actually be the default LLM for all of the agents in your workflow, unless you specify a specific LLM for each agent. And this is really important to make sure that if you're not using any other agents or any other LLMs, that you use an LLM that actually can do function calling. Because if your agents are using tools, that is essentially the LLM they're going to be using. So you want to make sure that has function calling if you're using tools with your agents. All right. So we go from the start, and then this is our welcome agent, agent 0. And then we have the system prompt that we use, where we're telling it that it's a travel support agent, and to greet the user and ask them if they would like to search for flights, right? And then, just like we have it here, where it goes to the routing agent, the output goes to the condition agent, and then based on what the user is looking for, it's going to route that request to either the API search, the booking module here, or a general support agent. And this is going to become very important in a little bit as we talk about what this actually is able to do. Okay, and so let's say that the user wants to search for a flight. So that information, once they put it in, it goes to an LLM node. And this LLM node basically has access to a flight search API tool. Okay, and so if we go ahead and take a look at that, we can see that this is essentially an API tool for SERP API, okay? And so that is going to return a series of flight information, flight data, that we are then going to process and show to the user, right? So we're going to take the raw information and we're going to show it as an HTML, as a table, basically. And then we're going to allow the user to choose what flight they want. So if we go back to the diagram here, the user is going to do the search. It's going to display the flight information, and then the user will have the opportunity to refine their search, change their search, or book the flight, basically. And this is where we actually came into like an initial problem. So initially, we actually had a loop that goes directly to the welcome agent, and that was causing a problem because these agents are sequential. And so that means that whatever information one agent generates immediately goes to the next agent unless you have something called human in the loop. And human in the loop is essentially an option or a setting that allows you to require approval before the agent actually calls any tools. But that's the only way that you can control the agents at this time. There's no way to actually input text into the agent. It'll just go straight to the next agent. So what we had to do was we actually switched out this loop for an end node, okay? And so what happens is when you actually switch this out for an end node, the entire conversation ends, but you're still keeping all of the chat history in memory. So what that means is that you can actually go all the way back to the beginning and, ask a question or request something, like for example, booking tickets. And because it actually has access to the chat history, it can actually route you to the right place, and your data is still there. So it's like a virtual loop without the loop, right? Another feature that this allows you to do is when the conversation ends, you actually get control back in the chat window. You can actually type in text again. And so what we actually were able to do with this was we were able to actually pass messages to the user, because normally when the agents are talking to each other, the actual end user doesn't see the messages. But sometimes, especially in this particular case, you need to see what the agents are talking about some of the times. So in this case, what happens is that when the flights are displayed, the conversation ends. And then if you have a question or you have a request, that actually is passed to the welcome agent. And then the welcome agent will essentially respond to you. So for example, if you had a question about a flight, what would happen is that that question would come back to the start. It would get passed to the welcome agent. And what we did was we actually have it so that if you're not searching for a flight or you're booking a flight, the output of the welcome agent goes directly to the support agent. And that is what you see when you are, chatting with the model. You're actually here, because otherwise you would not see any of the messages passed between agents. And so this was basically a workaround so that we can actually have more input into the system and actually book our tickets. And so let's go ahead and check out where we are here. Okay, so this is the end of the nodes that allow you to search for flights, right? So once you actually have searched for your flights, and if you're ready to actually book your flight, we have the booking nodes here, where what will happen is that it will essentially look up the information for your flight based on your chat history. Then it will review your flight information and then send that information to the ticket purchasing agent. And at this point, we actually we will require approval, human in the loop, and it will actually ask you whether you want to purchase your tickets or not. And then if you click yes, it will continue and it will call the tool. It will purchase the tickets. And in this case, it's just, showing you the receipt. And then it'll display the receipt and end the conversation. So that is basically how the system works. Of course, it takes a lot more work to actually make it work consistently, but this is exactly how it works. So let's go ahead and show you an example of this in action. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to bring up our flight information here that we want. And we're going to show you the conversation from the back end so you can see all of the agent messages. This is really important when it comes to actually troubleshooting your agent and finding out what it's doing. And in fact, the only way I could have done this is actually by looking at all the agent calls and the agent messages to try to understand how to work with the agents and be able to make them do what exactly I wanted them to do. So let's go ahead and start this. And so we're going to just type in hi there. And then it's going to show us the agent messages. Now, this isn't always what you'll see, but at least from the back end, you can see what the agents are doing. And as you can see, the agent responded to my request or responded to my text input, but I didn't see it, right? It didn't actually start. It didn't stop at the agent 0, the welcome agent. It went straight to the routing agent, and then the routing agent passed that to the support LLM, and the support LLM displayed the message, okay? So it says, welcome to our travel support service. Would you like to search for flights today? And so I'm going to say, yes, I would like to search for flights. Okay, and so now what we can see is, we can see one of the first problems that we have is sometimes it will hallucinate, okay? And so what we want to do is we are going to basically push through, right? Because this is not, this is hallucination, and sometimes you can just get away with just ignoring it for now. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to type in the first flight that we're looking for, okay? So let's see what happens. So what it should do is it should go and search for the flight information that we're looking for. And so in this case, it did, right? So what it's doing now is it's going to the flight search API, and it's bringing back a list of all of the flights from Sofia, Bulgaria to Madrid, Spain. Okay, and so we can see these are all of the flight information basically. And then it says, would you like to book any of these flights? Please provide the flight number or type refine search. Okay, and so we are actually right here in the workflow. Okay, so let's say that we actually want to refine our search. So let's go ahead and say something like, actually, I'd like to refine my search. Okay, so now it asks me, could you tell me your departure city and destination? Okay, so instead of going from Sofia to Madrid, we actually want to go from Vienna to Budapest. Okay, so let's go ahead and type that in, and we're just going to give it the details. And what it should do is it should go back and actually look up that information, that travel information. Okay. So it goes back, it looks up the travel information. And as you can see, it gives me some of the flights from Vienna to Budapest. Okay. You can see the travel airport here. All right. And so now let's go ahead and let's ask a question. Let's say, based on the flights, or actually, what flight would you recommend? Based on price and flight time. All right, so what it should be doing is it's going to take a look at the data, and it's going to give us a recommendation on the flight that we should choose based on our preferences. Okay, and so let's see here. So it says, okay, this is what we're seeing, what we should see in the front end window. Here's what you should recommend, right? So what it's recommending is Austrian Airlines, flight number OS 721. Okay, so it says this is the cheapest option and has the shortest flight duration among the available flights. So it's 45 minutes. And if we actually go ahead and look it up, I believe, let's see, which one was it? It was 721. Was it 721? Okay, let's go back and see 721. And 45 minutes, 310. They're the same price. But okay, so let's go ahead and let's now go ahead and say, okay, I'd like to book flight OS 721. And what it should now do is go to the booking agent and process our order. Goes to agent 0 first. So it's really important when you're actually, working with your chat flows to actually find out what the errors are and what the problems are, so you can actually solve them. So it says excellent choice. Here are the details for your selected flight. So it's asking me, would I like to proceed with the booking? Now, we actually had the approval setting set up, but it's actually not showing it. It's actually not showing the buttons for some reason. I'm sure that'll be sorted out. But one of the things that we also did was we actually made sure that the price reflects how many passengers are actually coming on the flight. So if you actually go and you scroll all the way up, let's see here, 310. So it actually should have updated the total. Okay, so I believe this is for the flight itself. So let's see if this works. We type in yes. And it should give us a receipt for our flight. Let's see what happens. It's always fun working with sequential agents who have their own autonomy. Okay, so this is something that you might run into when you are testing your chat flows. Sometimes when you run into the approval process, you know, clicking yes or no to continue using the tools, it actually might get stuck, especially if you don't see the actual buttons. So sometimes what you can do is you can actually just click out of it and then click back into the chat flow. And if it still doesn't do it, you may have to do it again. So you type in yes. And you know, this is essentially a bug with the interface. Somehow it's not registering your process. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to book our tickets again. So essentially, it essentially ended our the chat flow. So what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to book these tickets again within the chat flow. It says I'd like to book flight OS 721. All right, so it seems like it's a bug, but what we're going to do is we're essentially at the end of the process. And what happens after you say yes is that it essentially gives you the receipts for your tickets, okay? But this is essentially the process. And so, again, this is something that you may actually have to just test it in the actual chat embed window to see exactly how it works. But just keep in mind, this you may run into this problem too. And I think it has an issue with just the displaying of the buttons within the dashboard's chat window here. Okay, so as you can see, we have to require approval in order to use the tool, the purchasing tickets tool. And essentially what this does is, in this particular case for this demo, it essentially just shows you your ticket information, and it's like prints out a receipt. Okay, so again, you may run into this issue as you're working with it. What I suggest is, you know, basically restart and see if you can make it work again. But again, this is the dashboard, so what really matters is the actual chat embed window to make sure that works well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to run through the same chat flow, but we're going to do it from the front end. So basically, we're going to take the chat embed, and put it on our website, and then interact with the sequential agents from our website. So you can actually see what the user sees instead of, you know, seeing all the agent messages. So let's go ahead and start and say, start with hi there. And then it should greet us and welcome to our travel support service. And we're going to say, I'd like to search for flights. And it should route us to the flight search agent. And for this particular example, we are going to go from Vienna, Austria to Budapest, Hungary. All right. And so let's see what the options are. 2 adults, leaving in October, coming back in November. So it gives us a few options here. All right. So we're going to ask the same question. What flight do you recommend based on price and flight time? So it's going to review the information, and it should give us a flight recommendation. All right, so it basically just gives us the flight information. There's not much more they add to it. So if we go ahead and take a look at 721, this is 310 based on 45 minutes. And it does look like it's the cheapest flight for the best flight time, since there are some that are actually pretty expensive. So let's go ahead and let's book that flight. Let's see if it works this time. I'd like to book flight OS 721. All right, so after we request it to purchase the tickets, it actually asks us, do we want to confirm with the booking? And so this is the human in the loop setting that we set up previously. And so in this case, unlike before, it actually shows us the buttons. And what these buttons basically do is they basically inject the words yes or no, in this case, into the chat flow. And so earlier, I think maybe there was an issue with showing the buttons. Maybe there's a HTML issue. So let's go ahead and see if this works. So let's click yes. And what it should do is it should show us the receipts for our tickets. So it does. It works this time. So it shows us the seats for our tickets. And let's go ahead and see if it actually did the math right. So it actually got the math right as well. So we actually told it to multiply the price of the tickets by the number of passengers. And so in this case, there were two adults. So the price is 620 euros. And our flight is confirmed. And our tickets are waiting inside of our email. So this is an example of a successful chat flow. This doesn't always work just because of a variety of different issues. But this should give you an idea of what you can do with sequential agents, all right? Again, it's extremely powerful, and there are so many things you can do with this, especially when you start connecting with APIs and, different workflows and chat flows. And, you can also connect to additional or external chat flows as well. So there's a lot of things that you can do with this. Now, working on this demo, there's quite a few things that I learned about building out chatbots. And one of the things that I learned was that it's extremely important to make sure you have a really capable LLM because your LLM in this case, is going through and is doing multiple things. It's not just doing conversational retrieval. So you should have really a good LLM. So for this particular chat flow, like I said, we used the Mistral model. We actually used not the one that's inside of Flowise right now that's available. We actually used the very latest Mistral model because we were actually running into issues with some of the tool calling and things like that. And this particular model is model 2407, so it's the latest version as of this video. And so that really helped us with some of the tool calling. One of the things that we found was that when we were using the OpenAI models, after running through this, this sequence again and again, we were actually coming up with repetitive patterns. And this actually may be something that all of the models, recognize to try to maybe prevent maybe spam or something like that. But that was something that was important. So if you're experiencing that, you may want to switch out your models to basically handle that. One of the things we also did was we actually used Grok inside one of the chat flows to basically take the raw JSON data and actually create the tables from it. So that really worked well for us. Sometimes the Llama 3 models, at least here, the model is fast, but it doesn't always do tool calling very well. That's something we also learned. But in this case, because there's no tool calling, it's just taking data and transforming it. It worked really, really well. Let's see, what else did we learn? In this case, the responses are still quite slow. So if you can, minimize the amount of data that you're using, try to find ways of speeding things up. Like I said before, this was using the Grok model here really helps speed up the table, right? Because before it was taking forever to actually see the table. But once we actually added the Grok chat model, the table basically displayed instantly. And what we will do later on in the future is we actually test some of the, I don't know if this was the actual latest Grok. Okay, so they do have the tool use preview. So we'll actually have to test that later on to see how well it works. Potentially, it could actually really help improve the speed of our models. And so, yeah, the other thing that I learned with this is that your prompts are extremely important. because they're essentially going to determine or tell the agents what to do. So you want to be as clear as possible with your prompts. So for example, for the agent support, the support LLM, one of the prompts we had was to essentially display only the following results to the user. So this is the output from agent 0. So we can actually see what the agent was showing us. Otherwise, we would never have seen it. So yeah, it's very, very important to understand exactly what your agents are doing so you can actually optimize your chat flow. And not to make them as, try to make your chat flows as simple and straightforward as possible. That way you or someone else can actually go in and understand what's happening. If necessary, you might need to actually go back and actually just make a diagram to see exactly how everything works so you can actually start working on things and improving them. The other thing was the chat history was very important. So, you can use this without an agent memory, but if you're ending conversations and you're picking conversations back up again, this was really, really helpful for being able to continue the conversation. So yeah, this is the flight ticketing system. It was a great way to learn about sequential agents and understand what they can do and what they can't do. In the future, it would be nice to be able to actually have the agents display output to the user directly, just like you see with the tool use. So you can see here with the custom tools, you can actually return the results directly to the user. And in this case, we were returning results directly to the agents. But it would be nice to actually have that feature built into the agents themselves so the actual users see what the agent is saying, especially if he's connected to another agent. The other nice thing that would be nice to have would be to be able to actually enter text input, just like with the human in the loop, enter text input into an agent and basically interrupt the chat flow so you can actually interact with the agent and then potentially go in different directions. But I'm sure all those things are coming. So let me know what you think about agent flows if you're using them in your projects, and I will see you in the next video.